city property, followed by Public Works, then the Water Department, and since Mike wasn't nice to us last time, Wastewater will be last. You keep trying.
Michael, find a comfortable seat, Michael. It's going to be a while.
Steve Joyle, Facilities Manager, City Hall. For our fiscal year 23 maintenance budget, there is a slight increase, 4.7%, basically attributed to the power line, which we need to increase from $45,000 last year to $54,000 this year. There would be a 20% increase, $9,000, basically just going along with the rates that have risen, as we all know, for electricity. The other item that we do have to raise also is the heat line, where you need to raise that from $20,000 to $24,000. Same reasoning, price is going up. We have tried to offset that a little bit by decreasing our miscellaneous supplies budget from $12,000 to $10,000, and also reducing our vehicle and equipment maintenance budget from $6,000 to $4,000. So that represents a total budget of $242,000, $9,000 increase, or 4.7%.
Questions? Councilor.
I have a comment, and that's that you do a fabulous job keeping this place beautiful.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. No second?
It's the vote that matters, isn't it? This budget reflects this facility, or?
Yes.
So it doesn't,
Yes.
because you also are involved in some other.
I am. I
facilities, and
oversee
those
other
that's
areas of the
embedded.
city, but no, this is strictly for City Hall.
Second page.
We don't have a year-to-date thing for this tonight. A year-to-date report.
You got one included?
Yeah, I've got one.
Last one? We moved it over. How much
Section
did you
here.
down?
But
That was
is,
2 pages.
You were given one that was printed April 28th.
yeah, I got it.
Question. So the power, where are we with the solar credits?
With what?
Solar credits that we were supposed to get?
I have no idea. That's not, I
Are
don't handle
they
that.
even close to being up and running?
They are running, but we won't know, we won't know for several weeks about the credits or how they're distributed. We're gonna work in, Josh and I discussed, we're gonna work into the overall final budget of $50,000 revenue to offset the costs of all overall electrical needs for the city, because we simply don't have the data to be able to know exactly where the credits are going to be distributed and what those credits are going to do to individual department line items for electricity. So all of the departments have increased their electricity line items. We simply have no idea how those credits are going to shake out and how those individual departments will be affected by the credits for savings. So we're going to build in a very conservative saving considering what the anticipated savings are, but with no data and no experience to be able to make a more educated guess, we're gonna build that into the overall budget.
All right. So going back to the power thing, we approved solar farms with the idea that they would produce power and we would get solar credits, but right now they're producing power and it's just going into the grid and we have no idea of knowing what that cost will be.
We're beginning to capture the credits yet, but we haven't seen them because we haven't even gone through a full cycle, billing cycle yet.
And are those credits, was there an ultimate dollar amounts, or is it, so, let me rephrase it. So the cost of energy is obviously going up. And so as the cost goes up, are we capped at a fixed amount in terms of what we can benefit from? Or is it based on the percentage of whatever the spend is going forward? Do we know?
So we're captured at 26%.
26% of whatever we're paying, or of what it was at that time, in terms of what the state is providing for subsidy?
Believe it at that time.
Okay, so, and the reason I ask that, that's an important distinction in terms of, as the energy costs are going up, we're likely to see an increase. Even as we realize the savings, we will benefit from that, but we still may see our energy cost line items going up because the expense is going up and we don't get it on a percentage basis, we get it on a, there's a cap, there's an ultimate number that that they're getting reimbursed or paid for those credits.
Yeah. And again, without knowing exactly what those impacts are gonna be on individual line items, we haven't made those reductions in this budget, but we're going to capture some of the savings, anticipated savings.
Thank you. Councilor Kaplan?
Believe me, I'm not one to recommend an increase in anything, but your gasoline is flat.
Yep, and we don't use a lot of gasoline. That's basically for the city van, which I'm the only one that uses. I probably fill up once every couple of months. It's basically to the transfer station, around town to pick stuff up, so it's, I'm satisfied to keep that flat. I don't think there's any reason to increase it.
Yeah, the year-to-date on that, you've only used $300
Right.
so far, so.
Good. And where's the year-to-date on the maintenance on the vehicle?
So Steve, one of the rules I tell people, when you hear the council go quiet, you just kind of inch away as quickly as possible.
I didn't know if I could do that or not.
I would. And Councilor Kaplan?
You didn't get a raise this year?
Did I get a raise this year? I did not.
You did not.
He's non-union.
They don't get raises if they
Do I want a raise this year?
I
I do.
It's worked
As a
into
matter
this
of fact.
budget. I mean, if this budget passes, right now, we have a 5% increase for all non-union employees.
If you pass this budget, you'll get a raise, so Pete's on you.
Well, cost of living raise.
Well, it's the only payroll I've seen that's actually gone down from 2021.
The payroll line, advised by finance just to leave that. I guess the finance department takes care of that line. So I was told to keep that at what it was last year.
Well, his employee, he has one employee who works underneath him and has been with the city for 6 years, 7 years?
What, James?
Yeah.
7.5 years.
7 years. He's no longer in his department, he's transferred to another department, so we'll be bringing on a new person who will be starting out at a
Okay,
lower
that
rate of pay.
explains that.
So,
Thanks.
Or you could just pay me more money.
I'll write you a check.
Any other questions?
We have a motion?
We don't vote.
no voting, workshop.
All good?
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it. Public Works.
Which section is public, that found it?
This lady talked to us.
Councilor.
Could I ask, I don't mean to interrupt, but could I ask a simple question about the budget process? Are these collectively voted on or individually voted on?
So when we get.
When the time
Yeah, so the process that the council has followed is to, obviously, we can't hear it all at once. So we hear each department or departments on these Monday sessions, to kind of get a sense of what those look like, and to try to identify as individuals or collectively where we see an issue, where we want to make a change. And so that's what the purpose of the workshops are, is to kind of form that up. And that serves as that informational piece. What will happen is that, once we're through the workshops, we will, on the final workshop, whatever date that is, we'll have an opportunity to talk about the entirety, to have that discussion, say, okay, what have we heard, where are we at, and we're gonna have a discussion about that. So we have an opportunity to think about it in its entirety as well. Again, no voting takes place because it's a workshop, but hopefully through that process, we start to identify, to say, boy, we don't have agreement on this area, what can we do, where can we change? To try to get to a place that we know that when the budget is presented to us in that June meeting, that when it's presented, we are close to, in terms of being able to vote on that. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to agree with it, but hopefully, if we have glaring issues as individuals, that we can have city staff and through the manager take that back before June. Because what we don't want to have happen as a council is to be so far off that in June we can't act on a budget. So we're hoping, that's what the workshops are designed to do, is to try to look at the individual, collective, and then when we vote, we do vote on the entirety of the budget, but that's in
One number.
One number.
Okay.
But in taking that number, there is opportunities to tweak it. So if something's changed, it changes that number. And but yeah, it's not department by department, it's the city budget that comes forward.
But, and just to add to Dale, all of the department heads will be here at that June 6th meeting. And they'll be prepared to answer any questions. So if somebody does have a particular department, particular item, that collectively the council wants removed at that meeting, that we missed, that we didn't pick up on prior to, then we'll be prepared to make those adjustments so that at that meeting, we can vote on a final figure.
Thank you both.
Did that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we could, Council, there's just one more section within this.
Oh, there's, okay.
The miscellaneous property of the city as well.
Oh, okay,
There's another
okay.
sheet in there in your workbooks to review really quickly, and Steve said that he could answer any questions on that. Most of the numbers were done by me based on year-to-date spending or known objectives, but Steve knows the properties a little bit more, so if you have questions about that, you can do it.
Could I ask the section again? Nine, okay.
It's just because.
And just for the record, I'm not prepared to present those budgets, because usually I don't present those. I do oversee the maintenance at Knowlton Park, at the Erkey Building, and at Moore Community Center. So I would be willing, obviously, to answer any questions that I could, as far as those go.
Actually, just don't know where Simmons Pond
Yes.
property is.
It's actually in Hancock. It's where the fire department has a training site and the police department has a firing range. We own a piece of property there.
That far over the line.
Yeah.
And when I was going through these numbers, I basically held most of them flat, with the exception of the Moore Center, which has already gone over last year's budgeted amount so far this year. Seems to be issues popping up fairly regularly on that, and so
Yes.
the previous year's budget, I believe, is too low for what we're seeing on an ongoing basis. So I pushed up that number, and the North Ellsworth Tower, I increased that slightly with that Jason Ingalls suggestion, because that's a communications issue. So those are the two that really had any difference with them.
Well, I do think that that's one, we don't need to get into it this evening, but maybe on that final workshop, is to talk about the Moore school or Moore facility, just in terms of maintenance and where it stands, because that's an issue that we know we have in terms of what we're responsible for, what the tenant's responsible for, how that shakes out, and what we want to do going forward. But I think just setting the stage in terms of those costs, so that the community understands that, so as we think about it in future years, that it's a known issue, and we have a better understanding about that.
Steve, question, I see it on here, and it reminds me, under the Knowlton property, flagpole at Knowlton School and flagpole at the corner.
Yes.
I haven't looked this weekend.
No.
They're still down?
Still down. Unfortunately, the only game in town is out of town, so I'm kind of at the mercy of when they can get up here. This is northeast flagpoles out of Waldeboro, I
Yeah.
believe it is. I've been in contact with them for months. We've gone back and forth. Originally, it was just a Knowlton Park flagpole I was trying to get repaired, actually before this past winter. They were ready to come up and do it. One of the kids got COVID. Long story short, it's been pretty drawn out. I'm still in contact with them. We're going back and forth, and now I'm still waiting for an actual date that they're gonna tell me they're gonna come up and do it. Obviously, it's gonna require a lift for both. We're gonna try to do both at the same time,
All right.
hopefully ASAP. Would have liked to have seen it done before this.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, this time we can really.
You sure?
We'll see.
Okay. See how far I get.
Once he's out the door.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
All right, Public Works. So I prepared a little speech, I guess you'd say, for the highway section. I assume that's where we want to start. So I'm here tonight to discuss the budget, and I'm going to assume my request for additional staff member. This request stems from various places. First of all, additional work put onto the crew in the past few years. Some of these items include mowing Knowlton Park. This used to be contracted out. It is now being done by the highway department. Smaller items like setting up the parklet, taking it down, putting up Christmas trees and taking them down, putting up banners and taking them down. All those things add to the list of items that the highway department has to do. That has been added in the last couple of years. The basketball courts, the rec commission used to help put up the sound curtains. Now the highway department does it themselves. DeMeyer Field, the YMCA used to oversee the DeMeyer Fields. Now the highway department is opening them in the spring, closing and winterizing them in the fall. And I myself am coordinating with the cleaners and the trash haulers and all the different things that happen out there during the summer and fall seasons. We implemented a fix-it ticket system, which helps track the resident requests, but it also requires additional time on myself and mostly the highway foreman and crew leader to address them and then track them in the system. And then some green plan committee, we planted some trees this fall. That took some time and staff, as well as the maintenance agreement we have to water and help maintain those trees. We also have additional new expectations from citizens that includes sidewalk maintenance in the winter. In the past, sidewalk was something that got to the next day or, within the first 24 to 48 hours. Now the expectation is a little higher than that, and we try to do the best we can with what we have. Potential trail maintenance in the winter. There's been discussions about what the walking trail is going to entail. Private roads are wanting more and more maintenance as more year-round residents and new residents not knowing what a camp road is. They're constantly wanting more and more and more maintenance type things. The trash around town, we've added additional trash barrels, but it is constantly something that we have. There's been a significant increase in the amount of trash and the amount of days that we have to go around picking up trash. And then also just generally from the items not getting done. gravel screening and pit maintenance. We have not had time in the last 2 years to screen our own gravel and maintain our pit as we need to. We haven't been able to have as much time to do preventative maintenance on our equipment as we might want to or need to. We don't have the time to maintain our shop and our sheds. They need paint, they need stain so that we can save the buildings that we have. We have street signs that need replacing and straightening. We have roadside mowing that's being done late or not done at all because we just have not got to it. The sidewalks here in downtown, they have weeds growing up out of the cracks and it drives me nuts. But again, don't have time, don't have the staff to do those. The basins, the storm drain basins, they fill up with winter sand and cause drainage issues. Again, we get to as many as we can, but not nearly enough. It's just a constant battle. We have a lot of roads, we have a lot of needs. A lot has been added to this crew in the last couple of years, and so I'm requesting 1 additional staff member.
Do we have any vacancies currently?
We have a mechanic vacancy, yes, but not a truck driver laborer vacancy.
Are we volunteering?
No. That's good.
Lisa, I have a question about the cleaning out the basins.
Yep.
We've had a lot of discussion in meetings and privately, about drainage, and I wholeheartedly agree with you that drainage is pretty much paramount to most anything else. Have you looked into contracting that out?
We can contract that out, yes. It comes at a cost, I believe, 2 years ago we put it in the budget and it was $25,000 for a quarter or a third of the system. I can't remember what it was, but we took it. What's that? And you still have to send 1 employee with them, yeah. They have to do the traffic safety side of things, but,
They have equipment that we don't.
Back truck.
yes.
I'm sorry, Michael, did you say something?
Back truck.
Yeah, so I mean, some of them we can do with our sweeper, right? So we do a good number of them with our sweeper, but there are some that we have to contract out just because our sweeper is not, the hose isn't long enough or it's not a
Right.
big enough suction. But even that is, we get to it when we can, but we're not doing nearly enough to make sure that the winter sand gets out of our system so that the system can be maintained better.
How many drainage issues are there in the course of
I don't wanna talk about it.
in the course of spring and summer that you could, that you would say are caused by the fact that these haven't been backed out?
Probably 75% of them, and some of them are just that they haven't been backed out consistently enough for the last 30 years, and so they've rusted out or deteriorated.
Councilor Cassidy.
All right.
Is the sand that's backed out recycled?
It cannot be, no.
What?
It's considered contaminated.
Yeah, I asked
But we're
this a
putting
few
salt
years
back
ago.
on the road anyway, so why not?
It gets reused. Sometimes it gets reused for the shooting range, for the backstop of the shooting range. It gets reused. It just doesn't get reused as salt sand.
There's no grit left in that sand. After you put it on the road, and your cars travel over it, the trucks travel over it, it crushes it to almost a fine powder.
Okay, that explains it.
Right, and the gas and the oil are the potential contaminants. Yep.
So there's an open position and you've already got overtime in for them? And a new position is already overtime calculated in. Do you have overtime for a position that's not?
Because of winter snow plowing.
And that is for the mechanic as well?
Yep, the mechanic position does the sidewalk plow generally.
All right, and so they're gonna have a CDL plus mechanic,
Correct.
and how much are they making?
Depending on skills, I believe it's 24 to 28, depending on what kind of licenses and that kind of thing they come in with.
All right, so they're gonna be a, what, diesel mechanic or just a regular?
Diesel mechanic.
A diesel mechanic that has a CDL with a clean background check, and we're gonna pay them, it says here, $23.11.
That's the low side of it, yeah. So, sorry,
That's a lot
23
to
is
ask for $23 an hour.
That's the starting wage for someone with just a basics, right? If somebody comes in with more experience, it would be potentially more than that. And that's the overtime can kind of compensate that a little bit, the dollar amount and the overtime.
All right. In the private sector, what's the going rate for a diesel mechanic?
28 to 30 something probably.
And a diesel mechanic with a CDL? With a clean background check and a clean license and everything that we're asking?
Well, here's the thing, we also have union contracts, right? And those dictate what we can and can't pay. The only thing we can do is if they have experience that's relevant, we can bring them in at a step that somewhat compensates them for what they potentially have.
And thus the open position. Okay. I'm good.
So just as and it's not this position, this applies across the board. For me, this is where my thinking is at this year. The economy is just heading in a terrible, terrible place. And everyone is impacted by that. And food prices, gas, everything, and we all know it. We see it, and people are struggling. So that has a trickle-down effect that impacts what we can and can't do. And I certainly, everything you said, I think the Public Works crew does a phenomenal job with the task at hand. The amount of demand that exists in this city is off the charts. And it's something that we're gonna be hard pressed to ever get to the place where we can really address what we need to. Because there are just so many needs, and we talked about earlier, we have so many roads. But my concern is that for every position that we add this coming cycle, are dollars that impacts everybody in this community that are paying taxes at a time when that's going to be very difficult for people to afford. And I'm also concerned about that impact in terms of the city. If we treat it as a business, businesses are certainly going to be in the same place at some point, each business is impacted by the rising costs, and at some point it impacts their workforce, and it impacts on their employees. And would we rather give to our existing employees, or do we water that down and add and incur new expenses at a time when all these costs are taking place? So that's that. I wanted to just say that that's where I'm thinking when I hear some of the additions, of just wondering whether this is the right time, even though we have all these needs. Is it really the right time for the city to add workforce? And we've heard some of those positions presented. And so it's going to be an ongoing question I have.
Yep, as an Ellsworth taxpayer, I appreciate that. I understand.
Councilor Campbell.
I will say that this past winter, I had the privilege of being the wingman in the plow truck. And it was a very eye-opening experience seeing how they were patchworking equipment. You know, these are multi-talented individuals that work for this particular department and go, in my opinion, unrecognized. You know, like having a CDL and diesel mechanic and a clean background check, all of these things that are required just for that one position. And then looking at the skill set, even before I ever went in the plow truck to see how you folks work, I've always said, wow, I can't wait till I get to Ellsworth so at least I can drive on a clear road. In the winter, they suck in the summertime because it's like driving over oversized Legos. But in the wintertime, it's nice to be able to drive over roads and not worry whether or not you're gonna make it to work. And when you work in medicine, you have to, there's no calling out. You have to get there. And so I appreciate it, but then after seeing it, I got a totally different perspective. You know, there was a motorist stuck, they stopped and helped, they just like plowed the way so that the motorists could get out. They're constant, they're nonstop, and even so much as you were out plowing, and you were doing all the city stuff, and you don't get overtime. So, it's one of the unrecognized departments, in my opinion.
Councilor Howell?
I'd like to point out that the winter roads are always fabulous in Ellsworth, Maine. And I'd also like to point out that it's one thing to do the work, okay? The work is hard enough. But don't forget that wondering when they're gonna have to do the work needs to be compensated. So they're limited to a weather report. Am I correct? On a weekend or on an evening or what have you. It isn't so much, you know, if you could plan a snowstorm next Thursday night, that would be wonderful, but they can't plan anything. They are hostage to the weather guy at 6 o'clock or whenever you look at your phone. So we have to remember that has to be compensated because they have no ability to predict the weather, and they have to work when the weather is there. And wondering when you're going to work is probably just as stressful as working.
Sometimes, yep.
And the fact that there's a storm on Thursday and then another storm on Saturday, and they've already worked 36 hours on Thursday, and then they still have to do it on Saturday.
And
We're
I,
probably still there.
and I think those are excellent, and that's kind of where my thinking is that the best recruitment is retention. And if we don't retain our current workforce, if we're looking at this as a business, if we're not competitive and if we're not addressing that side of the equation, then we lose the great people that we have. And every time we add positions, it impacts our ability to do that part of it. That's my only point about the new positions. It's not about the existing staff. It's in fact that we want to be in a place where we don't end up not supporting them the way we want to, because there's a natural increase there as well. So that's why with the new positions, it's an opportunity to evaluate it from that perspective of, yes, does it add value to the crew in terms of having extra resource? Yes, but at the end of the day, it really isn't the crew's decision in terms of they don't do more. We have to prioritize, and the city has less of that valuable resource. I want to shore up our workforce and retain them first as part of this process. Councilor Howell.
Is Mr. Moon a part-time employee?
No.
And there's an error here, I believe.
No, he's right, because his salary is off. It looks like Mr. Brackett's might be too.
Yep.
So the total number will change.
It will.
If he's a 40-hour employee,
Yep.
at that hourly rate, it looks like it should be 55,000 round numbers.
Yep.
Well, it looks like the overtime for Hopkins and Moon are duplicated somehow, unless
They
there's a
make the same amount.
It's a contractual
So-
obligation.
So there has been some changes in this staffing. Like, there is one person on here that's no longer with us, well, he's with us, just in a different department. So those dollars, there's somebody else at a different rate. So
Is there a mandated overtime amount?
No. They're 40 hours a week now. The
Okay.
only overtime is winter.
Right, with
Plowing.
is
All right,
contractual,
it is contractual,
yes.
all right.
So does your budget number go up with these errors?
It will, it appears.
The payroll budget.
Yeah, the payroll.
That's a big part.
So is that something you can take a look at and then email get that corrected and just?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of multiplying it by a different number. Should be a pretty quick fix. Have that? Yeah. So what's the new number? The new number is 785,611.20.
Did you fix bracket as well?
Yeah.
Counselor Hanson?
So would it go up 43 grandish?
Counselor Hanson?
I just had a question about adding another person to Public Works. Trying to make the question make sense in my own head. If we don't, we're behind on infrastructure projects, is that right?
Correct.
And being behind on infrastructure projects costs us something down the road, like these projects cost, more like this thing that we were talking
Yep.
about tonight.
Yep.
So I'm just trying to think of how to factor that into a decision about,
Like, will this one position help us eliminate maybe one of those? It's completely possible. So, right now with the lawn mowing, we have 2 people lawn mowing all the time, so there's 13 of them, including the mechanics, so right now there's 12. 2 of them go mowing, pretty much every day, all summer long. That leaves, 10, right? So previously, we would try to split the crew into like 2 different projects, right? So we'd be getting 2 things done at a time. A lot of this in-town type of stuff requires flaggers, so usually you'll have 2 flaggers. Then you need someone operating a piece of equipment, and then you need at least 1 dump truck. That's 5 people right there. This additional staff member, and that's just 1 truck. A lot of times you need 2 trucks, depending on what's going on. This additional staff member would help maintain the ability to do 2 projects at once, because one of the other things that I didn't bring up that's factored in, and it goes to what Michelle and Steve were talking about, is these guys are not allowed to take vacation in the winter, which means all their vacation time is spring and summer. So there can be weeks where there's 2 or 3 of them out the entire week, because that's when they're allowed to take vacation, and so then we're cutting staff, you know what I mean? I don't wanna call it a game, but it's a balancing act that we're constantly allowing them to take their vacations, but having enough crew to continue doing the work we need to do.
Counselor Hahn?
How does the staff feel about being so restricted about their vacations? Is
It's
that a
not that
point?
they're not necessarily not allowed, most of them choose to be here because there's potential overtime money and they're committed to this town and this department. They know that if they leave, that's gonna mean more work for somebody else.
So, which is true? Are they allowed and don't do it, or are they not allowed?
I don't think it's a written,
They're strongly
it's not,
discouraged.
right,
You can't, I mean, contractually, you can't ban someone from taking vacation time.
Thank you.
But they're.
So if
but
someone
there's-
wants a vacation, they can take a vacation.
yeah.
Their camaraderie doesn't allow that in their own minds, maybe, but if someone wants to go to Florida in February, who are we to say they can't do it?
They
Right.
can, but their work ethic won't allow them to.
Thank you.
Yes, it's not that they can't, they just, like Glenn said, it's strongly discouraged. If they choose to, we make accommodations.
Thank you.
and hope it doesn't snow.
Right.
Are there other ways to accomplish some of the work that you're talking about? For example, would it be less expensive? Could we, as a city, hire for temporary workers to do flagging, for example, and so that we can redeploy staff as opposed to having?
So, yeah, we did. We looked at, a couple of years ago, we looked at trying to hire part-time summer mowing. That didn't work out. We had one person apply and they quit after the first day and no more applications. There are flagging companies, but they're next to impossible to get because you'll see most of them work for paving operations and construction operations, and they are essentially guaranteed work from May 1st to November 15th, and trying to get one or two one-off on, for a day here, a day there is a lot harder to do than if you just have one all the time. Could we have one the whole summer? Potentially. But there's days we wouldn't need them, and I don't know if that would be the best option.
That's okay.
What about reaching out to like a company like Labor Ready? You can get people for construction, you can get people for pretty much any type of job by the day.
You could, there's just some safety liability to that, I would assume, but I haven't looked into the liability part of it. I don't know where the liability would lie.
Corporation would assume that liability.
I
I'm
would
not
think
sure.
so, but I don't know.
It's worth looking into.
I've worked with people like that before, and let me tell you, it's no trouble.
Okay.
Just,
Would you, I'm not even gonna let you elaborate. Councilor, keeping you out of trouble.
I will say this, that labor-ready temporary help requires a lot of supervision.
Right.
yes,
There you go.
A lot of supervision.
that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's other potential options, right? Like Knowlton Park used to be hired out mowing. I think back 15, 20 years ago, the city hired out all the parks to be mowed. Highway didn't do any of it. There's that option to try to, if you guys wanted to go that route and hire out some of the mowing, so we'd get 2 people back from the mowing operations. That's definitely an option. Outside of that, I don't see any other really great.
It's quiet.
Anything else on there?
It's quiet.
Okay. Highway garage, anything?
It's quiet.
It's quiet.
You can't keep turning, we have a few minutes. Any questions on that?
I'm trying to find the chapter for garage.
It's just the same
the same
chapter,
one.
just 2 pages back.
You get a blast of air, or is that uncomfortable for somebody?
I don't know if it's gonna be hot or cold, though.
Here.
Oh.
Are you hot or cold? I'll tell you what, okay.
But I don't want to
I'll
be
let you know if
the...
it's cold.
Okay,
We'll find out.
thanks. If it's just me, then there's no need of it.
Getting old. Getting old.
Anything there of note? For the
The highway garage, basically electricity and heating oil is the only.
You think that heating oil is gonna be only 16,000? If last year it was 14,000 for 2022, and it's pretty much almost double.
They're gonna turn the thermostat down.
Right. Gonna get them all another coat.
What they really need is heated wipers.
Right.
It's-
Um,
It'll melt to the windshield.
I think we put that one in before all the gas craziness, Josh. I'm not overly uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, you've only spent 85% so far this year anyway of the 14, so.
Okay.
We'll be plus or minus a little bit.
Okay, now you can turn.
It's quiet.
Parks
Well,
and
no, I
trees.
just had one more question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Do you
sorry.
have anything in here for anything to keep that ice off those windshields? Like,
Negative, not specifically, no.
you need something.
But I have this vehicle equipment maintenance that if we can continue to get new vehicles every year, we might start having some money for that.
So $2,000 additional for heated wipers.
They don't make heated wipers.
On a dump truck.
They do.
They do?
Yeah.
I've never seen them.
Yes, they do.
Wow. I'm gonna buy me some.
They couldn't, he had to get out of the truck, literally, like pull on the side of the road, get out with a large scraper from the side of the truck, and then I handed it to me and I'm doing
I
this.
do this, I hold the steering wheel, I
That's,
reach
that's
out.
when you get out of the truck and walk home.
He was just happy to have you there to help, and then he didn't have to
I'm
do the other
like,
side.
don't you, because the way it is with the plow pushing the snow up on the
Oh, yeah.
windshield, it freezes because the defroster's on, but it's not hot enough.
Right,
to keep
and you
it
have to have the
from
defroster on so that you don't fog up, but you have to have your windows down because
you
otherwise you're
don't
sweating.
die.
It's a joyous, long day.
So heated wipers,
Yep.
$2,000 in that budget, that is perfect.
Heated wipers.
So parks, trees, cemeteries, nothing major there.
Where are we?
And then I think the next one
Parks,
where there's
trees.
gonna be questions is probably solid waste.
What, can you just highlight, because the public.
Yeah, solid waste, the only real, if you'll see, actually, the city appropriation is down, just because we've had an increase in recycling revenue, which we talked about a while ago. And residential stickers, we brought the number up to closer to what we're actually selling. The only real increase, and there's still another potential increase that we can factor in maybe last minute, is, the transportation costs. Right now we have a contract with Harris Disposal, but that went out to bid, and the bids are due June 7th. So we'll know better what that real cost will be after we receive that bid and get a new contract. And then the only other thing is PERC went up pretty significantly in their cost to us. Can't remember, I wrote it down somewhere. Where did it go up? Where did I do it? PERC is now up to $79.20 a ton. I think it was 73 or 74. That went up almost $5 a ton.
What is special waste disposal?
That is for the non-hazardous waste collection that Hancock County Planning Commission does, and then we pay for what our residents take during the hazardous waste disposal. It also could be used if the council so wanted to. Previously in the past, it was used to have like a free cleanup day, I believe. Mark, you were here for that, right?
Yeah, and that was my next question. And we haven't had one in
Since I've been here,
4 years,
probably 5.
5. And it was very, very popular. I believe we've had 2 of them since I've been here. And actually, one of them, several of the councilors were the gatekeepers, we work the day up there, and
Is that the one that I remember though that was like $20,000, 17 or 20?
yeah, they aren't cheap.
No, it wasn't cheap. So obviously what we have in there right now, $5,000, not gonna do it, but
But it got a lot of god-awful junk out of a lot of yards.
yeah, I believe there's
and
quite a few tires.
And a lot of basements.
Yep.
Tires we stacked off to the side. I don't remember the reason why. Did we sell those? No,
I don't,
we junked them at them?
We can only put 4 to a container, so we stacked a couple hundred there. And
Is that what it
every time we
was?
filled a container, we threw 4 of them in.
Okay.
It's
Anyway,
not-
I'm wondering if it may not be time to consider.
Well, it's not
Another
that bad
one.
to sit there and go through the, if you have debris, not necessarily tires, You're talking about special waste like paint, tires.
So that's the one that the Hancock County Planning Commission did, like this past August, is for like waste oil, paint, hazardous like liquid type things.
Right.
The one he's talking about is more like tires and
Carpets.
Couches.
bulky waste
Yeah.
type stuff.
Yeah, I used that facility today to unload some carpet. It's pretty convenient. You just pull up, you wait for the green, you pull up, it's a red light, you stop,
Yep.
wait for the green
To
light.
DM and J out
and
back,
then-
yep.
And then, yeah, and the two guys just take it off your truck and then you go through the thing again. They give you a ticket and you pay it and you're good.
They unload your truck for you?
Yeah. You should wear a dress.
Not our guys, DM and J.
I was gonna say, they didn't unload mine when I went there.
But yeah, I think other than that, there's nothing really changing wise in that solid waste budget. And then the last one is water supply protection, which I will hand over to John Whedon.
One more thing on,
Oh.
your heat bill went down over last year? For solid waste?
Yeah, honestly, they don't use the heat a lot. They run it in the heat in the transfer station part, I believe, is electric, so that's part of electricity on it. And then the real heating is only the propane that's down at the recycling center, and they just keep that just warm enough to not be cold in the winter. So it's not,
Okay.
it's pretty
They have rugged
minimalized.
people up there.
Colder it is, the less it smells.
Michelle?
Okay, I'm gonna let John go.
They've spent $411 so far this year on heat, so.
Good evening, John Whedon here from the Water Department, and I have some figures in front of you for the past few years and this year's. Not a lot of drastic change. I did, however, put a recommendation for a new pay rate starting July 1 of $15 an hour in. Finding it very hard to compete against the local burger joints and such in our new environment that we're finding ourselves in. We did advertise, as we normally advertise, in February for boat inspectors at the launch for both Branch Lake and Green Lake. We had quite a few applicants and quite a few interviews and quite a few thanks but no thanks when we discussed the wage that we're paying. The wage that we were paying 16 years ago was $3 an hour more than minimum wage, about 30% more. And we've been flat, and we backslid for a few years down to minimum wage, and we've stayed at minimum wage for quite a while now. And it's having an effect. I've had several comments, the ones that I mentioned in general, but specific ones were, I'd love to, but I can't. And my favorite one was, I'd love to, but my wife won't let me. So we have a variety of opinions, but they're all basically not in this environment. We've got some great people who have volunteered to represent the city out there right now, but we still have some gaps in our coverage, and I would like to eliminate the gaps in our coverage as the city had promised the people around Branch Lake when the organization was first started, the boat launch was first installed 10 years ago on Branch Lake.
Any questions, comments?
I think it's a fair request, $16 an hour, and you may not find anyone even at that.
Right.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Does the city have a minimum starting wage? Because I'm looking at you know, some places, you know, some jobs are starting at this, some jobs are starting
Well,
at that, but.
The union contracts all have pay scales, so all of the unions have starting pays. But as far as non-union employees throughout the city, there's no pay scale or set dollar figure.
All right, thanks, John.
What's the, adding office rental? What is that? 54,000.
That's different. That's not him.
Am I not in wastewater? Oh, there it is, sorry.
We haven't yet. So is that a different sheet you're perhaps looking at?
What are you looking at?
I already flipped.
No, you're looking at water
Yeah,
department.
that's
We're
water.
looking at water.
This is water supply protection, which specifically talks about the Branch Lake Flood Inspection Programs and the watershed
Oh, there it is.
watershed work around
So
Branch.
it's water, but it's other water.
Other water. Same water, different protection efforts.
But, Counselor Kaplan, that's a great segue.
Yes, it is. But the reason it's separate is because this is not covered by the water department, which is an enterprise account. So this, what you're looking at here, this water supply protection, is funded through taxpayers, whereas, half, excuse me.
So the water comes, the water from the lake comes from the taxpayers, but the water that's delivered comes from that guy. Right,
That's fair enough.
all right.
That's a fair enough explanation. It was divided up because it provides protection for a lot of things as well. There are a lot of things we do in part of our watershed protection program, protects the economic vitality of the lake and its value to the taxpayers around it, i.e. lakes that have been infested with invasive plants have seen up to 30% of the value drop in their real estate valuations. And you can do the easy math where that would have to be made up from, should that happen on one of our high-value lakes. And so I think the city decades ago, said, we really don't want to see that happen here, especially on Branch Lake, the water supply.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Reggie, you're up.
All right, so while, as Reggie's approaching, I'll just remind the public about the enterprise accounts versus the other departments. So water and wastewater are enterprise accounts, which in its basic form means that the rate payers, the individual entities that utilize the services end up paying for that service through rates. And that's how those services are paid for, by rates versus through taxes. So essentially the difference. Anything finer?
No, I think that's good explanation.
So good evening, I'm Reggie Winslow, the superintendent for the water department. I have a few items in my budget this year for capital expenditures. Analyzer redundancy, we have no,
Yeah, they don't have capital, Reggie. It's just your operational budget.
so I think we are breaking even.
Just shortened his presentation.
Capital next week.
Next week.
Yeah, all right.
Budget going up.
So our budget has gone up. There's a rising cost to everything. We've got some projects coming up.
What's the office rental, Reggie?
So Pump Station Point is a very old building, built in the late 1800s. It is brick, double wall brick. It is literally falling apart.
If we end up selling that, I mean, let's not downgrade it too bad here, okay?
It's a beautiful historic building.
Yes, it is.
Located on the water with a great view.
It does have a great view, and I do not want to leave that location, but the building just needs some work. And I believe it was the agreement for the council last year to no longer put money into that building and to basically move the water department. So we are also outgrowing that building. So we found a rental in town that has a garage space that, and office, which it is separate, but it is temporary and will be a good fit for us for now.
What is separate?
So the garage from the office space is
Oh,
separate.
okay.
So right now, everything's attached.
Gotcha.
And there's no office space within City Hall?
No.
Not even like on the third floor?
No, we've got people sharing offices as it is. There's not any
Yeah.
issue around
We have a two-bay garage full of parts and pieces that we would need to store as well, along with an air compressor and a vacuum trailer.
Speaking of parts and pieces, what's going on with that fire hydrant?
Oh, there's been several. They are magnetic. Cars are attracted to them. So we've had several hydrants lately get hit, and we just ordering parts. They're weeks out on getting them.
So to get back to the office rental issue, because I think this is a significant issue. Most of you, because I've taken several of you to that location, and the conditions of that building are deplorable. I mean, it is literally a dog bumped it and knocked a brick out. So the decision needs to be made at some point. If we're going to have employees working into those conditions, we need to either invest a significant amount of money into that property to rehab that building, or we need to relocate those folks, because it's just not a suitable work environment. And at last count, roof alone was,
So 3 years ago, I got an estimate to do the replanting of brick and rebuild brick and the roof, and it was $150,000.
so the long-term goal, as we explore the building a new water treatment plant, is to relocate their office space out to the water treatment plant. And then all they would require in town would be some storage space for equipment, so when they're in town working on water mains, whatever, they don't have to drive all the way out to Branch Lake. But when they go to work in the morning, now they report all to Pump Station Point, and then somebody is assigned out to the treatment plant while the others go out and do their daily routines. So it makes sense going forward as we look at a new water treatment plant, we relocate all their office space into that facility, provide some storage here in town for them to access for their equipment. So this is a temporary stopgap measure to get to that point without investing significant resources into Pump Station Point to rehab that building. We can, if we relocate them out temporarily, we can sell that building or the property, if you will, have for probably a pretty decent chunk of change, which can then be applied towards either continuing their rent or more permanent solution.
What about giving them space in the industrial park?
I don't know whether we have any property in the industrial park. Generally, we don't own any.
No, I don't think.
EBDC owns property, but the city doesn't own any property out there.
$4,500 a month. Is there any triple net tricks to this where you have to pay the taxes and the insurance above that?
I believe that is all included in that figure.
Where is $5,400? Where is $4,500 a month locating you?
Okay, so $4,500 a month is on the high side. We haven't negotiated anything with this person yet, and since we haven't negotiated, I don't know if we want to say where it is at this point. I don't know.
I don't think we should.
It's located right here in town.
It does include, it is triple net. It does,
So
but that's
there's more
included.
than just 54.
That's included in that price.
The 54 is adding your taxes and insurance.
I believe so, yes. And I think we'll end up with something less than the 45 a month, but we put it in there to be safe until we go through negotiations. Because until you say yes or no, it's no point in negotiating because we don't know if we're moving or not.
And you said 3 years ago the building needed 150 grand?
Yes.
You could probably triple that.
Yeah, at least double.
If we sell that property, I think there's recreational access there. Would that remain for citizens?
Oh, the kayak launch?
Yeah, because
So
you
that
can
is
get on a
at the
ladder.
beginning of Hump Station Point Road. And the water department land is actually private land, privately owned.
Okay.
So it's a totally separate.
That's just a
it would have
totally
no
different
effect.
public access
Yeah.
spot. Okay.
And we'd be sure to maintain, if it's just an easement, it would go with the deed, we'd make sure it maintains through that.
Yeah, we have an easement through Black Bear, or it was Black Bear last time to access that.
And chemicals, you don't think that that's,
So chemicals, those have remained pretty consistent.
They have even
I
through it.
just got an email today that there will be a 7% surcharge for our coagulant. I don't know how that'll affect, but I believe we have always been just slightly under the allotted amount for chemicals.
Short of flying my ignorance, what is CIP for $163,000?
That's the capital improvements. So we have a water main in town.
Next week.
Okay.
That's part of the capital improvement budget?
That's the
Yes.
capital, yes.
Okay,
Yep.
okay,
Which we'll see all of those next week.
okay.
If you turn the next page is the revenues, if you have any questions on the revenues.
now with water, rates are regulated.
Yes, through the PUC.
And so there's a process that if that, obviously as costs go up at some point, the rates get looked at, but that's a regulated process, a public process that would
Yes,
take.
yes, that'll go to a public meeting.
Reggie, when, the last time the water rates were raised,
January 1st, 2019 is when the last rate increase took effect. That was a 10% increase. So a normal bill went up about $5 for the minimum usage. We are in the process of doing another rate study to possibly increase rates again this coming January.
okay.
I believe this assumes a rate increase. So because of his increased costs, we did assume we assumed a rate increase to show him with a balanced budget essentially. Obviously go through the PUC and we'll have to go through the public hearing process and you guys and the whole thing. But, we did assume that we would have to have one so that he doesn't go into the red.
Reggie, what are we paying interest on? Is that the revolving fund? I see that $1,000 budgeted.
I think that's revenue.
That's revenue.
Those are the revenues.
Well, all right, it's been a long night, never mind. Thanks.
Chaplain?
Under the explanations, category 601 payroll, what is the stipend?
So, there has been talk of giving the water crew a stipend for being on call, to carry the phone throughout the week and answer any phone calls that come in.
Okay, and that's not covered under the 26,000 for overtime?
No,
The 26,000, who's getting that overtime? Is that divided out amongst them?
so yeah, that's split between the 4 employees, and again, that's just an estimated figure.
And the utility clerk, is that a part-time position?
So the utility clerk is split between water and wastewater. So
Okay, that would explain why it's
Water
lower.
pays half, Mike Harris pays the other half.
Okay.
Wastewater pays the other half.
Wastewater.
My share, but, yeah.
That's
That's a nice truck you got there.
$38,000, $39,000.
Vac truck heard from?
And I'll just add to that, Counselor Kaplan, that this shop is not unionized. So they're one of the very few. So they don't have bargaining authority. Otherwise, that would be something that stipend is something that would be resolved in a bargaining unit contract, but they aren't unionized, so it's something that would just be budgeted for.
And like the on-call position, that's where they take the trucks home?
Yes. Yep.
And you have 4 employees?
Yes.
And how many trucks do you have?
We will have 5. So there are 4 other employees in the water department. Myself makes 5.
So everyone gets a
So
truck,
everyone has their own truck.
whether they're on call or not.
Right.
But they only go home if they're on call. If they're not on call, they stay here overnight.
Yes, yeah.
They drive their personal vehicle, come in and get into a water department truck. It's only the one person that's on call each week that takes the vehicle home.
Okay. So everyone gets a truck.
Right, well, so.
You get a
I'm gonna
car,
step
you
on
get a
your
car.
toes. So, when, they each have their own truck because they all have different things they're doing. Like Glenn talked about, when they come in, they meet in the morning, one person's assigned plan duty. One person takes their truck out
Different
to plan.
directions. They spread it
One's
out.
gonna go do meter reading, so he's driving all over town doing meter reading. Another one could be painting fire hydrants, or flushing fire hydrants, or doing, what they call service orders. They go into houses and replace meters, find leaks, so they're all over doing different things.
I'm surprised you don't have electronic meters that kind of report back to the home computer.
Oh, we're working on that. It is in the process.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? You good for now?
Good, Reggie.
But we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Step on up, Mike. See? Can't save the best for last.
Yeah.
It's about time you get up there. I don't know what you've been doing.
Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good night tonight. My name, if you didn't know, is Mike Harris, wastewater superintendent.
That was a Savannah White.
I know, all of a sudden now he's gonna do a show.
I was hoping he was gonna sing.
A new car.
Tapping and,
Open from him.
I know.
All right,
He's our closing act.
so let's talk money. So what we have, through several discussions with myself, finance, public works, city manager, we have multiple line items that are going to increase this year for much the same reason as most of the other departments are seeing. Only some of ours are on a larger scale because we have a larger situation. So, power, for example, is going up significantly. We have the main plant, which uses a significant amount of power, and then we have the 8 pump stations that also we're paying for power on, and then we have the heat tape along 1A underneath the Union River Bridge that we also pay for power for. So, at the beginning of the budget season, Josh recommended 30% possibility for the increase. We looked at it, we looked at our power bills. We are a tad under. I don't know what the year-to-date today is, but, so 300,000 is the number that we came up with, to cover the increased costs in that. But there's a couple of things in this budget that are unknowns, and so we have placeholder numbers here, because we just don't know what's gonna happen yet. So I'd like to bring those to your attention first. So sludge disposal, composting, you can see last year we had it at 100,000, which will exceed that. And we've got it at 150,000 this year, and the reason for that is because LD 1911 is passed. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, LD 1911 puts a prohibition on composting biosolids, municipal biosolids. And so the direction of the legislature is that we will be required to send the biosolids to a landfill. And so that's a multi-layered issue because the landfills don't want it. Landfills aren't permitted to take all that's going to be coming to them. So the legislature, I don't know how they're solving that issue. But we have already done some preliminary discussions with possible locations. And, you know, one of the best options that we're looking at right now is actually sending it to Canada. For somewhere around the $100 range, we currently pay $86 a ton to send it to Maine Organics, I think. If we send it in-state, and these numbers are flexible because they've changed even since I've started talking about it. But we're getting up around $115 for some of these places. And so I have the $150,000 in there. But honestly, we're kind of playing it by ear right now because the legislature has passed a law, but nobody has figured out how they're going to implement it. So that's a big issue. The other issue that we're having is the heat line item. So currently, the facility is always run on heat pumps, which provided all of our heating and cooling, and we used our effluent to do it. The heat pumps have 2.5 out of the 4 heat pumps have completely failed. So we're running on 1.5 heat pumps right now. And so so the heat pumps went down in December. We've had multiple people trying to come in and assess the situation, repair the situation. Thayer ultimately ended up coming and doing some work for us. They got the 1.5 units back up and running. So we had to switch over to boilers. So we switched over to boilers, which we couldn't use hardly at all, which significantly increased our propane usage. And one of the boilers failed. They don't make that boiler anymore, it's obsolete. So currently at the plant I have 1 working boiler and 1.5 working heat pumps. And so I have in the capital budget for requests for this year, which we're not covering until June 6th. That as a project to try and replace the heat pumps and the boilers and get the plant functional by this winter. But that also, because I don't know if we're gonna have the heat pumps back, I've increased the heat line items, you know, in as a preventative measure to whatever the cost increase is gonna end up being if we have to use boilers. And so that's an unknown issue. And then some of the other line items that you're gonna see big increases on, and like plant chemicals, are 2 reasons. One, because all our chemicals are going up. So for example, coagulant that Reggie was talking about, our coagulant I think was $1.45 a pound, is now $2.03 a pound. Our hypochlorite, which was $2.79 a pound, is now a gallon. It's now $3.29 a gallon. And so the second piece of that is that line item's been overexpended for multiple years now. We've requested increases and just we haven't funded it for whatever the reason is adequately, and so now this year it's just a double whammy because now not only do we exceeded it again, but now we have the cost increase on top of the exceedance. And so, you know, we're hoping to fund it at the proper level so that we're not running into each physical year knowing we're going to exceed stuff. And, you know, we've been doing that, and we need to try and curb that. And so Josh has been working with me, and that's our goal, is to look at every line item and, you know, that we have traditionally exceeded, and like building maintenance, for example. Building maintenance has been funded at $25,000 for years, and when we had the new plan, it was fine. Now, as the plan's gotten older, you know, we're 10 years out now, things are starting to materialize that cost money. And so, you know, we projected a $35,000 line item budget for that instead of a $25,000 line item budget for that. Let's see. So power went up, professional services, line item went up because we took on the APG Neuro's turbo blower service contract last year. So that's $29,000. 52016 licenses went up because the DEP's increased their license costs, so we just increased the number accordingly, because that's the only thing that comes out of the 52016 line item is the 2 discharge fees that we have to pay the DEP. 52035 is the building maintenance I just spoke about. 52038, I'm asking for an increase to the pump station maintenance because we're supposed to back out some of our pump stations every year. And then we've gotten away from that because we're spending a lot more money cleaning and vacuuming and jetting the lines. So we went from, I think we had 15,000 a year previously for sewer line maintenance, which is 2037. You can see if you go back to 19 and 20, and then you see from 21 on, now we're paying 40 plus thousand, 40 grand a year, I think we paid this year, for vacuum jetting and cleaning a third of our system. And so the pump stations have been put off, but the pump stations need to be done. And so, you know, it's always a constant, and you guys go through it, you know, it's always a constant balancing act on what's the priority, where does the funding need to go now, and what can we put off and then do later. And we're running into some of that. And so, Water Street, we're doing the Water Street pump station project. Water Street's one of our main pump stations that should be pumped out every year. I didn't pump it out last year because I knew we were gonna do the project, and when we do the project, they're gonna completely redo the pump station well. So we had a surcharge there during the last big rain, and we are gonna get a notice of violation from the DEP because of the surcharge, telling us that we have to clean out that pump station well, now, instead of waiting for the project when it's gonna be done anyway. And so, so that's why I asked for an increase in that line, because the High Street, Water Street, and Main Street pump stations really are the ones that accumulate the majority of the grease and the issues that we have, and we need to clean them out. This is the big, this stuff that's coming to fruition now is the request for the back truck, and I'm not trying to be facetious here. I'm simply saying, this is why I saw this coming. And I know that it's a big expenditure, and I fully understand the priorities of the budget and the need to balance now and later. But now, you know, we're talking about a sewer line maintenance, we're talking about the sewer line maintenance line item that's gone from 10,000 to 50,000 a year. The pump station maintenance line item is gonna go up because the pump station line item also includes, we have our generators maintenance every year, annually. We have a contract with CMD Power Systems to come down and maintain our generators for annual. You know, I could push that, I could put that expense under, say, professional services, but now it's gonna push professional services. And so it's just a matter of adequately funding everything. And, you know, this is a tough year to do it in. So my job is to come to you and advocate for what I think is necessary, and then, you know, whatever you folks decide is what you decide. But my job is to say, this is what I need. And so that's what I'm trying to do for you guys. And, you know, I know there's only so much money to go around, so we do the best we can. But, you know, my budget is not an insignificant budget, and I realize that. And it just so happens that in this time frame that we're looking at with fuel costs going up, well, most of our chemicals are petroleum-based. So when the fuel goes up, the chemicals go up. And you can't not have the chemicals. They're for disinfection. And then, so I have chemical for disinfecting, which is 12% bleach, which your household bleach is about 0.05%. So we have 12% bleach. We have bisulfite that's required to take the bleach out of the water before it goes to the river to neutralize it. So we have those two chemicals. We have polymer, which we use to dewater the solids with, or they won't dewater. And so we have that chemical as well. And so, you know, it's a significant expense. And then, you know, the plant in and of itself is an energy consumer. We probably have one of the highest energy budgets in the city, I would guess. You know, we're probably pushing $25,000 a month in power bills coming out of there.
Councilor Kaplan?
Line 002, or 55002, Main Street Retirement, that is a significant decrease. Is that because the ICMA retirement went up?
I do not know.
That's Tony.
Because I think I'm the only one that has it in my department. I'm the only mainstay retirement person in my department. Everybody else is on the ICMA stuff.
And there's an increase in the cost to the health insurance?
Yes.
Additional staff member?
Yeah.
Additional staff?
So James, that was in facilities maintenance, is now in wastewater. And what prompted that to happen is I already had an employee that's been out on workers' comp for quite some time and still out. And then I had another employee get injured.
That was my next question, is workers' comp went from 8,500 down to 500? Even with somebody out?
No, that's correct. Year-to-date, we've only spent like $26 out of that line. We're self-pay workers' comp, we pay our insurance company, and then whatever they bill us for is what we pay. And where Mike has an enterprise account, he has his own separate workers' comp line, and that's year-to-date this year, so.
Okay.
And the workers' comp injury that he's had has been ongoing for almost 3 full years now, so, and that's all we've been billed, so I'm gonna have to take that for face value.
Okay.
Councilor Haynes?
And so, yeah, so there would be the increase for the additional employee in terms of salary and in terms of benefits. Because we were down to two healthy employees. It was only me and Ray running the plant. And that's not safe or sustainable. So.
I had a question about LD 1911.
Yep.
Does it say that you can't compost any biosolids or any biosolids that have too many? I forget what that's.
So PFAS is what's driving that LD 1911. So I've had two opposing opinions. So I thought and Glenn thought that if your stuff was under a certain level, you could compost it. My DEP inspector, head of the DEP inspectors in Bangor, Clarissa Trasco, says no, period. So I disagree with it. I've disagreed with her.
So if
But
I
we're
can,
trying to work
Mike,
this out.
If I can just maybe add a little clarity. So if you read the legislation does allow for composting of biosolids if they're below what they're identifying as an acceptable level. But that acceptable level has not yet been determined by DEP, and the legislation gives DEP until January to set this acceptable level. So my guess is the DEP person that Mike's speaking of is probably estimating or guesstimating that the DEP level is going to be, acceptable level is going to be set so low that it's not gonna be attainable. You're gonna virtually have to have no PFAS in your biosolids.
Because we are,
to
by the way.
compost them.
'Cause
We
what
are
you had
very,
told-
we are very low.
You had told us that
Yeah.
that we were very low.
Yeah, we are, so the current, before 1911, we were under. But there's two things are gonna happen in a year. One, they're gonna set a PFAS limit, it's not gonna be good. And two, which is something that we'll have a discussion on later, is they're going, there's 800 different sites in the state that are still allowed to land apply, and they're septic sites. And the DEP, the legislature gave the DEP 1 year to decide how those people are going to be handled. And the indication that I'm getting is they're going to all be told they can't land apply any longer, and they have to bring it to a facility. Guess who's first on that list?
So is, have any discussions taken place with our local representatives to talk about this issue, to bring it back to the legislature? Because it seems like if that's the case, no municipality is going to be able to do this.
I mean, there's a huge scramble going on.
It's a problem.
It's a big problem, because the other problem that they're running into is Juniper Ridge, which is the landfill that we all know, is owned by the state. That's a secure landfill, that's where we take all of our stuff that gets vacked out and everybody else. Juniper Ridge is owned by the state, but it's run by Casella, who has the biggest compost facility in the state, who's now gonna be shut down. And now Casella is telling the state, we don't want to run Juniper Ridge anymore. So, it's a free-for-all at this point in time. Like, I don't know where we're gonna end up with it. But it's gonna have to happen, because it's not gonna stop coming. So, something's gonna have to give.
I mean, we can't all, the state of Maine can't all transport and
Right.
dump everything in Canada.
Right,
I don't think that's a plan.
no.
Want to move on to revenue?
I just have one question. Is there a way to do wastewater treatment without PFAS?
No. PFAS isn't everything, it's just a matter of how much of what the level is of it.
Thank you.
And it's in everything, in your houses, it's in your nonstick frying pans,
You're not
it's-
putting PFAS
it's
in the
everywhere.
water.
It's coming.
With it.
Right.
Yeah, it's coming to us with the PFAS in it. So, yeah, and there's no easy way to take it out of biosolids. You gotta burn it, that's really the only way to do it. And so LD 1911, in my personal opinion, is kind of a knee-jerk reaction to some bad publicity that happened in Fairfield, where they had a note, you can't eat the deer order, and then Rundle were the first. And not to get too far off track, just what you should understand is those sites are like that because they had contracts where they would take either biosolids, paper mill waste, whatever the case may be, and they would put it on the same field for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. They're called legacy sites. Like our stuff that goes to Maine Organics does none of that. Our stuff is sold to, almost exclusively to construction companies. So if Sargent is redoing 395 and they need to replant a median, they buy the compost from Maine Organics because it's cheaper than buying loam and it grows better. Then they spread it on the median, and then then it's there, and they don't come back and spread more. So you're basing all this legislation on legacy sites that people have been putting the same stuff on year after year after year, and it's accumulated. And for the people who have low PFAS and are more, have a better avenue of disposal, we're the ones that are gonna get penalized. And so, it's a tough situation.
Revenue.
Revenue.
Okay, so for revenue, after discussions with Josh, Glenn, Lisa, so I got two things going on. Septage revenue, I would like to increase the septage revenue 2 cents a gallon. We haven't increased the septage revenue in 5 or 6 years. So currently it's at 5 cents a gallon, 7 cents a gallon. 9 cents a gallon for the different categories. So 5 cents is biosolids that we take from other plants that's already been treated, so we just put it directly into our storage tank. 7 cents a gallon is for septage, which is what gets pumped out of people's septic tanks, and holding tanks, things like that, that we have to screen and treat, and then we dewater it. And then 9 cents is for grease, that when somebody has to have their grease trap pumped out, restaurants and the like, and they bring it, we charge them extra because that stuff's harder to deal with. So, so when you look at our revenue, when you see the 490,000, that reflects the 2 cent increase. So currently, for this year, as of today, as of this evening, before I came here, year-to-date, we're around 275,000 so far that we brought in. This month alone, so far, we've brought in 48,000, and we got another week to go. And June's gonna be just as busy or busier. So I'm projecting, just looking at it from what information I have, I'm projecting, we're probably gonna be 350, between $300,000 and $350,000 in revenue through that. And so we usually do between 5 and 6 million gallons a year. So if you add 2 cents to that, it's a significant increase. And one of the reasons that I'm doing that is to try and offset a rate increase, because we are looking at a 4% rate increase that we're requesting. And so, the unknown that you see on this list for the last couple of years is sewer permits, because we never know what we're gonna get. And so, this past year, which isn't reflected on this sheet, Jackson Lab gave us a check for $164,000. But, the year before that, we maybe did $20,000. And so, rather than overestimate or underestimate, we try to go with fairly quantifiable figures that we feel comfortable with, that are accurate. And then the sewer permits will be, if we get a lot of sewer permits, there'll be a bonus for our revenue side.
It's quiet, Mike, there's the door.
I wish I had better news for you, but.
Are there any additional comments? All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
So one quick question before we depart here this evening. The question has arisen about outside entities. Some outside entities, recreational related, have reported out to the rec committee. And what will be submitted is a reflection of what the rec committee has put forward for recommendations. Do you all want to have any outside entity, including those rec folks, come next week? Or shall we rely on the rec committee's recommendations to move that forward?
Have him come next Monday night,
Which entity?
Glenn. Look at your calendar, next Monday night.
No, June 6th, I'm sorry. Next Monday's the holiday. For June 6th, the rec-oriented entities have already come and submitted their requests, and they come to the rec commission meeting, and the rec commission has vetted out those requests, and what we've submitted are what came out of the rec commission. So my question to you all is, do you want us to reach out to all of those groups and have them come back for the full?
Oh, God, no.
How many are there?
I don't know.
482.
Oh, well, then no.
No, I think that's why we have the rec commission, to.
Right, that's
Yeah.
what, yes.
To,
To do the vetting.
Yeah, to do that for us, and that's why they're there,
Yeah.
so that we don't have to do that. We have to put our faith in what they've
They've given us good advice in the past, so.
Could you give me an example of an outside entity?
Yeah, the Y, there's a Little League, all those groups that are asking the city to give them funding for next year.
Snowmobile Club.
Friends
in Action, Loaves and Fishes.
Well, no, those are different from rec, yeah. Rec is
The Grand.
the Grand.
But they will be
Y.
on the list.
Yeah, you'll see them, yeah. But you'll see what the rec commission has has
Yeah, I'd like to see
submitted.
what's on the list.
Will we see both what they've asked for and what the rec commission has decided to offer them? I'd be curious about that.
Yes, we can get those
Yeah,
figures.
they have all that.
Yeah, we have all
and
that.
Councilor Miller and I are sit on that. The piece that with the rec commission that kind of got eroded over the last few years is that it's a group of citizens who volunteer their time to be part of that, and they try to structure it. And over the last few years, they haven't had the involvement to vet through and all of these requests. And they had all of these entities come forward to their committee, they met with them, gave them an opportunity to speak. So they've done a lot of vetting, and it takes, it gives more an objective perspective of those requests rather than just us sitting here without all that vetting process, so.
They did put a lot of work in, with the hours, it's a long process.
To go through all this.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, what you'll see in your budget book will be the rec commission's recommendations. We'll provide the additional information on all of the entities that submitted requests, and then next week, if anyone has any questions, or not next week, June 6th. Should anyone have any specific questions on specific organizations, we can always reach out after the fact.
So,
Sounds good.
real quick, just before we leave, I just want to say the same thing that I said to Mr. Linehan. I apologize to the council. In my role as chair, I'm an individual and I have my own opinions. However, as chair, I should moderate that, and at the point that I felt like I needed to address Mr. Linehan differently, I should have done that, handled that a little bit better than I did. So it's a reflection on the council, so I just wanted to extend that apology to all of you for the way I managed that at the beginning. Councilor Howard.
I'd like to compliment you. You had a disagreement, and the two of you got together, and you shook hands and talked it out. I think that's, what else could we ask for?
Perfect.